tell me about when you first remembered learning tatting. We'll
When I
start way
remembered
back.
learning tatting,
Yeah.
we had lived in Chicago.
Okay. How old were you when you lived in Chicago?
No, this was earlier. But when I was 5, we were living in Chicago,
Okay.
and we lived in a Italian ghetto, which was
I thought you were Polish.
Polish and German.
Polish and German, and you lived in an Italian ghetto in Chicago.
Because all the neighbors were Italian.
Okay.
Needless to say, that made us outsiders.
Well, of course.
And we changed neighborhoods, and I went to a school on Clark Street, and I was in 2nd grade, which would make me somewhere between 6 and 7.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And when in the time I was in between the last part of 2nd grade and the first part of 4th grade, we lived in Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin?
Yep.
That's not all that far from Chicago, is it?
No, because that's my father and mother both were going to a meeting of the Theosophical Society. They didn't know each other. And he yelled...
Oh, wait a minute. Your parents didn't know each other when you were 5?
No, when...
I'm sorry, I'm not totally following this.
The narrative's not very put together well. We lived in one house on one side of Chicago where when we went back to visit later, my uncle wouldn't take me into the neighborhood. He said it was too rough.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Then we moved near Clark Street.
Okay.
And I went to a school there.
Uh-huh.
And then we moved to Milwaukee.
Okay.
And we were in school in Milwaukee, and during the summer, my aunt took me to Chicago to visit my grandmother
Okay.
and her in this apartment house they lived in.
Okay.
And I think my sister was there, Dorothy was there too, because she'd always go out and play with the kids, and I wouldn't go out and play with these strange kids. They were too different for me.
Yeah.
They were also too young. You know how big sisters are.
You were a snub. You're older than your sister Dorothy?
I'm older than all my sisters.
You're older than all your sisters.
I'm the oldest child.
You're the oldest one. Okay.
The only one who turned 80.
Well, that's something to be celebrated.
Yeah. So my sister was running around outside playing, and my aunt couldn't get me out of the house to play. And she was busy with something, and I kept saying, I don't have anything to do. And being the perfect obnoxious brat, she sat me down at that point with a green plastic type shuttle. It wasn't plastic, it was before the days
celluloid.
of plastic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A green shuttle.
Is that one you showed me that was your favorite?
That one disappeared.
You're kidding!
A long time ago. That's another story.
Okay.
But the green shuttle,
Okay.
But this little green shuttle was, you know, the plastic kind that has the closes on both ends.
Uh-huh.
And you have to go wind it up.
Oh, yeah. I call those clicky shuttles.
It's one of the clicky shuttles.
Clicky shuttles.
Yeah. And I studied. She gave me tatting thread to learn with.
Size 80?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well...
And guess what?
That's what I learned with, because that's the only thing there was, unless you were doing crochet.
Me too. See, but I was before you, because I'm older.
Well, yeah, you're older by quite a bit, because I wasn't born till 1948, and you were born in 29. So...
And 48 was after
that makes you old enough to be my mother.
I was away in college.
You're old enough to be my mother.
I was old enough to be in college.
You were old enough to be in college, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it was really... It was a case of her setting me down with the shuttle and giving me something to do. And I practiced, and I practiced, and I practiced. And finally, I could make the knot.
And it slid.
And then I went home to Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed my mother this great thing that I had learned from my Aunt Rose.
Did she give you a shuttle?
Who was her younger sister.
Did she give you the shuttle?
Hmm? Oh, yeah, she gave me the shuttle.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. At which point, my mother looked at me and says, I taught Rose.
Oh, wow.
I'd never seen her tat. And I don't think I have yet to this day. And she's gone for a few years now. I don't think I've ever really seen her tat. But she was always too busy taking care of kids and cooking meals and cleaning and
being a mom.
Being a mom.
Well, since you were the oldest, she had younger children to take care of, and that would.
Yeah, but she also had me to take care of them.
Ah, you helped. Yeah, well, that's the way it was, you know.
It was a time of life when the oldest child took care of the younger
ones.
ones.
And that was, I mean, you were born just right before the Depression. So when you were growing up.
By several months.
When you were growing up, you were the oldest in a family during the Depression, and that says help around the house big time.
Big time.
Yeah. Because, I mean, parents at that time were doing all they could just to feed a family.
Well, my mother used to, when my sister Dorothy, when I was 5, and we lived on Herndon, which was the first street I remember. My sister Dorothy came down with scarlet fever.
Oh my! Back then, people used to die from that stuff.
They came and took her to the hospital. At which point, they decided they had to do something with me because they couldn't afford to pay for the hospital unless my mother went to work. So my mother went and put me on the bus to Milwaukee, talked to the bus driver, and he was to look after me until we got to Milwaukee, and then he was to put me off the bus where my uncle was to pick me up. Mm-hmm. And when we got to Milwaukee, my uncle wasn't there, so the bus driver wouldn't put me off the bus.
Oh my!
And as we started driving away, I saw my uncle come running after the bus, and I yelled at, "My uncle, he's right there, he's right there!" And so
he stopped and let you off?
Huh?
They stopped and let you off?
He stopped and let me off, and
that's good.
I stayed with with Musha, who is what we call my grandmother.
Uh-huh.
And I stayed with her
was
for quite a
Musha
while.
a Polish thing for grandmother or something? Okay.
My sister says it's a Polish word for mother, but I never heard it used anywhere but for the grandmother.
You know. And
so I don't know, but did you see everybody in the family, including all the children, called her Busha. So, you know, and they wouldn't have given the children
something inappropriate?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, okay.
But I stayed there. And when my sister came to visit, when they took her finally out of the hospital, and she came to visit, and then they were going home, and my mother was going to have to quit her job to take care of Dorothy and me. And so I got to go home, but I didn't want to go home because I'd end up being tapped to take care of Dorothy all the time.
Yeah. Well, you were being an only child at your grandmother's, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, my uncle wasn't that much older. He was older by about maybe 9 years, but that's still. My mother had 2 sisters in that family that died from different diseases. It was common for children to die at that time, in those days.
Oh, yeah.
And that was way before I came.
Yeah.
Into it.
Yeah.
But that was how I learned. How I learned to tap was my aunt just being tired of listening to me bitch. There's no other way to put it.
You were being obnoxious, so she gave you something to do.
And
I understand.
My aunt died about in the last 5 years. She was in a nursing home in the Milwaukee area, where she lived most of her life, because that's also where my mother was born, was in Milwaukee.